And with that, we'll go ahead and start. So Nebula is our cloud management system. It's something that's been designed to be able to manage our switches, our wireless access points, and our security gateways. So Nebula is not the first cloud management solution, but it was the first cloud management solution that's been designed specifically for the SMB space. Probably the biggest name in this space has been Meraki, which was bought out by Cisco a number of years ago. Aerohigh was another big one. Both of those were really focused on the enterprise space. We saw that. We liked the idea of cloud management, but realized there was a real potential for this here in the SMB space. So that's what we did. So Nebula's been around since 2016, and we've been constantly rolling out improvements just about every quarter since then. We currently support over 60 different devices that can be managed through the Nebula interface. So Nebula itself here is made up of a couple different components. There is the hardware. So that's our switches, our security gateways, our access points. All of the Zyxel networking equipment you are used to. The main part of Nebula, though, is this here, the Nebula Control Center. You will often see it abbreviated NCC in our documentation. So that is the cloud interface that you use that handles all of the management. And we do also have a mobile app, which gives you some visibility and gives you some tools for your installers. But the core management is expected to be done through a web interface. And we have optimized that web interface so it works great on a desktop PC's browser, but also so it works good on a tablet computer. So if you do have a tablet, our interface will work great through the web browser on it. So kind of the idea behind cloud networking is to make your life simpler and to cost you less money. So here's what you would normally do in a traditional deploying a brand new network at a new site. And this is that same idea, but when using Nebula. So you'll see a number of those puzzle pieces have been grayed out to indicate areas where the cloud saves you time, the cloud saves you money, or the cloud saves you both. So we'll start here installing equipment. Things get done much quicker. In general, there is no local configuration of the hardware required. You don't need to set up your own monitoring system. The cloud handles monitoring of devices being online itself. You don't have to worry about setting up, VPN connections to your customer's location or port forwarding to individual devices. Nebula gives you full remote access to your devices. When it comes to storing things such as logs, the Nebula Cloud can store up to a year's worth of log and audit information in the cloud for you. And things like configuration changes and firmware updates are all done over the air through the cloud interface. There's no need to go on site to perform those actions. So now we'll sort of drill down a little bit more into Nebula. So one of the first things here is you can be up and running in just a few minutes. One of the longest parts of setting up a new Nebula account, if you haven't done one yet, or a new Nebula site, is creating the Nebula account itself. So you'll log into nebula.zyxel.com, create your account. If you've already got a My Zyxel account, you will link those two together. And from that point on, you can start creating your customers' sites in the cloud before you even decide and finalize the hardware that you're going to need to use. We've got a number of different wizards and things like that, which help speed up the process of setting up a network and have most of the main core features that you need up and running from the get-go. Now, once you've set up your Nebula account, you've decided which hardware you're going to use, and you've ordered it, you can simply add those devices to your network as soon as they show up at your office. You don't need to take the hardware out of the box. You simply use our mobile app. You can scan the QR codes on the outside of the box and assign them to your customer, and then ship those products onto the customer location. There's no need to take out the hardware until you are ready to install it, but you can go ahead and start configuring things right away. So Nebula is built into our hardware, the Nebula agent that talks to the cloud. So there's no need to buy any additional hardware or install any additional software to facilitate that communications. There's no cloud keys, there's no CNAs, there's no wireless LAN controllers, there's no virtual machines that need to be set up. The Nebula compatible hardware from Zyxel has that agent built in. It handles communication to the cloud by itself. And one of the key things here with Nebula is you have access to your customers' networks anywhere you have access to an internet connection and either a mobile app or a computer with internet access. So that way, you know, if one of your customers calls you up in a panic late at night, no matter where you are, you will be able to log in and see what's going on your customer's network. Nebula has easy guest access built in. So this is something I probably should have brought up earlier, but one of the cool things about Nebula is Nebula is used to manage our equipment. You do not have to create the entire site only using our equipment. You know, anything else that happens to be there, for instance, a lot of businesses, you know, they get a Cisco, you know, router, it comes from their ISP, or maybe they've already got a Sonic Wall or Fortinet security gateway. You know, you don't have to pull those out. Anything that you buy that's Nebula compatible, you will still be able to manage in the Nebula cloud. And anything that's not Nebula compatible, whether it's older Zyxel equipment or whether it's another vendor's equipment, you know, you would still manage those the same way you always do. You don't have to, you know, make it a Nebula-only account. So Nebula offers easy guest access. We have the ability to do this just with our access points. A lot of times to provide captive portal in terms of service and things like that, you need a special router or gateway device on your network. With Nebula, we do have those features built into our security gateways, but we also have those features standalone built into our access points. So you don't have to worry about taking out or adding another gateway into the network to provide guest access. And we give you a lot of flexibility on how to provide this guest access. So it'll work if you're doing a coffee shop or restaurant, you're doing a small hotel, or you're doing an office where they just want to provide guest access to their vendors who come and visit them or their customers. So we've got a captive portal built in with a redirect. We've got the ability to provide guest accounts, to have users log in with just a terms of service agreement, to have users register their own email and password. So whatever it is you're looking to do, it can be done with Nebula. So on the wireless side of things here, we offer smart mesh with our wireless access points. So that can be configured so you have access points that don't have a physical wired connection to the network. They can automatically create a mesh to other access points from Zyxel that do have a wired connection. It's also something that's beneficial should a Ethernet line be severed. Those access points can automatically flip over into mesh mode and connect that way. We offer enterprise-grade security. Most of our newer APs support WPA3, both pre-shared key and enterprise. And we have a number of the industry standards implemented here for helping you when it comes to fast roaming and load balancing of your access points. On the switch side of things, we have intelligent PoE. We have that classic Zyxel feature where rather than use the official 802.3 AT or AF standards for allocating power, we have a consumption mode which monitors the demand for each device and can free up that PoE budget for additional devices. We have a number of network protections built in, including ACLs, VLANs, the ability to block unauthorized DHCP servers, etc. And all of the switches in the customer's network will virtually stack. So you can manage ports on multiple switches simultaneously without needing to physically stack the switches. As I mentioned earlier, all updates are done over the air, so there is no need to directly access the customer site or visit the customer site. Configuration changes are pushed out over the cloud. Firmware updates are pushed out over the cloud. And on the switch side of things, we make VPN connections really easy. If you're doing site to site, that's easy. You just go into Nebula, select your customer sites that you want to mesh together, choose the topology for your VPN, and we'll handle everything else. For remote users trying to get back into the main office, we have the ability to email out a script that works with Mac operating system, Windows, and iOS. And that script can automatically configure the built-in VPN client on those devices to reach back to the office. Nebula was designed from the ground up to work for MSPs, managed service providers. So what that means is all of your customers are accessed through the same URL. You simply go to nebula.zyxel.com, log in, and you will see all of your customers and all of their sites there. You aren't setting up an individual URL for each customer you're managing. It's all right there for you. When you click through to a customer, you can see this view here where you can see all of the sites that they have and a little snapshot of information of what's going on those sites. We have Google Maps integration, so you can physically have those sites visualized on a map just to help you visually represent where those individual sites may be. And then when you click through to a site, it takes you to this dashboard here, which gives you a lot of information at a quick glance of what's going on the network. It can tell you things like how many wireless users are currently online, how many devices are offline, which applications are using your bandwidth, which users are using those applications, your PoE budget versus your PoE utilization, all sorts of information. And what shows up here can be customized there. On the left-hand side, you drill down to the individual types of devices, either for looking at monitoring or logs or for doing configuration. And then you've got drop-down menus at the top, which makes it really easy to switch sites or switch customers without needing to leave this page. So I'll just show here a couple of the screens showing you what's going on. This is our wireless view. So this is showing us the wireless clients, letting us know who's online, who was online but currently is offline. And then we've got a number of columns here which are fully customizable. So you can click there and choose which information you want to see. So you can see stuff like the maker of the Wi-Fi chipset being used by the device's name, which AP they're connected to, which SSID they're connected to, signal strength, all sorts of information there. And then we plot it out also visually over time for you. Similar type stuff on the switch side of things. We give you a nice visual representation of the ports, so you can see which ports are currently plugged in, whether they're providing PoE or not, what the speed of the connected device is, and we give you some graphs over time for network utilization. When it comes to configuring the ports, it's really easy. You simply click on the ports you want to configure, open up the configuration view, and it'll let you simultaneously change a lot of settings here on those ports. So Nebula, we get this asked a lot, how much is Nebula? And the answer is Nebula is free. So Nebula, the core version of Nebula gives you access to an unlimited number of customers, an unlimited number of sites, an unlimited number of devices. As far as I know, at this point, we're the only guys that still offer this out there. So there is no worry about being locked out of your equipment. Like a lot of the other cloud solutions, if you don't pay the mandatory yearly fee, you get locked out and lose the ability to configure your devices. Nebula Core is free and gives you access to the vast majority of the features these individual devices have. So I have a question here. This is from George. How easy is it to add Nebula to an existing site and settings? If the equipment is Nebula compatible, firewalls is what I'm thinking of. So Nebula in standalone mode. So standalone is the traditional way that you handle your devices. Call it standalone mode. And Nebula Cloud mode are two different modes. So when you, any device that's Nebula compatible, you can easily switch it over into cloud managed mode. And if it's being managed in the cloud, you can very easily switch it back to standalone mode. Unfortunately, because some of the features are different between these modes, the configuration does not get ported back and forth between the two, so you will have to reconfigure from the start. Now, having said that, most of the features you can start configuring them in the cloud before you actually switch the devices over to cloud mode. So you can get most of your settings set up in advance, and then you switch the device over to cloud mode, and it'll connect to the cloud and download that configuration. So it'll create minimal disruption that way, but you are going to have to reconfigure that firewall, recreate your rules. And just in general, the idea behind Nebula is to streamline things, make them easier. So because of that, you do often end up missing out on some features when you switch in cloud mode versus the standalone mode. So for instance, you were asking about the security gateways. I know we don't have as advanced setup of policy rules and things like that in the cloud version versus standalone. So that's something to keep in mind. Hope that answers your question there. Moving on here, when you're looking at our equipment, you will see them described generally as Nebula Flex. So when Nebula first came out in 2016, we had gone the Cisco Meraki route where we had one line of hardware for those who wanted to do cloud management, one line of hardware for those that were doing traditional management of your networking devices. Over time, though, the feedback we got from people was they didn't like that. They liked the idea that they could standardize on one piece of hardware, manage it in the cloud if they wanted to, manage it standalone if they wanted to, because you'll have customers that want the benefits of cloud management, and you'll have other customers that are doubtful of cloud management, and I understand that. So what we did is we created this Nebula Flex. So we are in the process of phasing out all the dedicated Nebula-only hardware, and everything going forward is going to be Nebula Flex, meaning it supports both modes, the cloud management or your traditional standalone management. So when you're looking at devices, you will see Nebula Flex mentioned, so that's telling you it's a dual mode device. Older equipment that doesn't support Nebula won't mention that on there. Some products, though, you will see will say Nebula Flex Pro. So Nebula Flex Pro means the same thing as Nebula Flex, but we give you 1 year of our professional pack license bundled with that hardware. And we'll talk a little bit more about it, but Nebula Flex Pro is an optional license you can use with Nebula, which unlocks additional features, primarily aimed at MSPs and those of you providing a more proactive managed network experience. It gives you access to more logs and troubleshooting tools and things like that. And I will talk about it a little bit later in today's presentation. We'll go a little bit more in depth. Access points are a slightly different story. Access points, when you go to Nebula Flex Pro, in addition to giving you 1 year of the Cloud Pro Pack license, those devices that are Nebula Flex Pro are also the devices that can be managed locally with a wireless LAN controller. So Nebula Flex Pro APs are standalone, cloud managed, or managed via local area controller. And that's something that's built in on most of our firewall products, the ability to use that as a dual function device, both a security router and a wireless LAN controller simultaneously. So just showing you here, the product lineups here that support these different things on the Nebula Flex side of things. It is going to be our 1 and 2 series access points. So things like an NWA 1123 ACV3 and NWA 210AX. And then it'll also include some of our new entry-level models that we're coming out with here, the NWA 50 series and the NWA 90 series. Those will be Nebula Flex. On the switch side of things, it is the GS1920 V2s, the XS1930s, and the XGS 1930s. And on security gateways, it is the USG Flex series. For Nebula Flex Pro, it is all of our access points that are at least 3 digits that start with 5 and 6. So WAC 510D, WAC 6303D-S, etc. Those all are tri-mode. So those will be cloud managed, and they include that 1 year Pro Pack license, standalone or wireless LAN controller managed. On the switch side of things, it is the GS1350 series, the GS2220 series, and the XS3800s. And then on the security gateway side of things, if you buy a USG Flex, which includes the UTM pack out of the box, it also will include 1 year of Pro Pack in addition to that out of the box. And then we also have the ATP series. Those can be managed in Nebula, but they do it through the Gold license. They don't have a dedicated Nebula type license. It's just sort of bundled in with the general Gold license. So let's talk a little bit about licensing. So again, the base version is free. We have what's called Pro Pack. So Pro Pack's been around since 2017, I want to say. Maybe, yeah, I think that's right. And that it unlocks all these additional MSP type features. We also added this year a Plus pack, something that splits the difference between the free version and the Pro pack for those of you that need a little bit more than what the free offers, but you don't need all those MSP type features. So the way Nebula licensing works is we split up your customers essentially into orgs and sites. So what we would call in Nebula an organization is a different customer for you, and then you would have sites under those. So with Nebula licensing, every device in an organization needs to have an active license to use Plus or Pro Pack. So if you have 3 sites and you've got 40 pieces of equipment, all of those, regardless of the type of equipment, will need to have an active Plus or Pro Pack for that customer to be able to access those Plus or Pro Pack features. If any device doesn't have a license, you are given a 15-day window to add a license, but if you don't during that 15-day window, then everything will drop back to the free version until you add that license. So if you have a customer which has some sites they want to have Pro Pack and some sites they don't want to have Pro Pack, you would split that up into 2 organizations. So those sites that need to have Pro Pack would be in one organization. Those sites which are fine with the free version of Nebula would be in a different organization from a management side of things. So now let's talk about some of the differences between the free version and the different licenses here. So all versions give you an unlimited number of devices that can be managed, an unlimited number of customers and sites. All of them have what we call zero-touch configuration. The fact that you don't have to generally configure anything on the local device itself. As long as there's DHCP on the network, it will get an IP, it'll reach out to the network, it'll download its configuration. And generally, even if you're planning to use these with fixed IP addresses, we suggest during initial setup to have DHCP enabled. Then once they've connected to the cloud, convert them over to fixed IP addresses and then turn off DHCP to make things easier. But if you can't do that, you can directly log into the devices and set up the IP settings. Again, it's true on all of them. All of them do over-the-air firmware updates. All of them do over-the-air configuration changes. All versions have access to our Android and iOS apps for management. All of them give you access to the core functionality of the devices, setting up different SSIDs, managing PoE, firewall rules, etc. All of them give you access to MAC filtering and 802.1x authentication. All versions give you access to captive portal authentication. So now let's talk a little bit about where we start running into differences. So one of the differences here has to do with log information. So the log information, user logs, things like that, with the free version of Nebula, you only get 24 hours of information stored in the cloud. If you go up to the Plus Pack, you get a week's worth of information stored in the cloud. And if you go up to Pro Pack, you get a year's worth of information stored in the cloud. Now, we still also support on the free version the ability to do syslog. So you can always export those logs via syslog to your own server if you want to keep more logs in there. Also, when it comes to troubleshooting problems, let's say you're running into issues at a site with your customer, you call our tech support. Our tech support, even with the free version, has the access to around, I believe it's a week's worth of logs, even on the free version. You just don't have access to the customer, the information that you view through the Nebula interface. Another difference here is with the base free version of Nebula, each organization can have up to 5 admin accounts. Plus Pack gets you up to 8 admin accounts, and the Pro Pack has an unlimited number of admin accounts. For user authentication, in addition to your standard radius type authentication, we also have our own cloud-hosted server that you can use. So if you're using that cloud-hosted server for user authentication, the free version limits you to 50 accounts in the cloud. Plus Pack gives you access to 100 accounts, and then Pro Pack gives you access to an unlimited number of accounts for user authentication. So now, what does Plus Pack get you that you don't normally find in the free version? So advanced firmware scheduling. So you can do firmware scheduling with the base version, but it's sort of a blanket rule. This is when I want firmware updates to be done. With Plus Pack and Pro Pack, you have the ability to schedule based on the type of device, or even doing schedules for individual devices. I want this switch to update on this date. I want this other switch to update at this date and time. It gets you access to advanced reporting. So you have the ability to automatically generate reports and have those reports emailed out to your customers or to yourself to help you keep an eye on what's going on. We have an automatic topology view where we will automatically generate a visual topology of your network devices to help you with troubleshooting and seeing what's connected to what. PlusPack also unlocks the ability to do email notifications or app notifications when devices go offline. And then it also unlocks the ability to use what are called Wi-Fi vouchers, the ability to have someone at the front desk generate an account with a username and password and hand it out to the end user there to be able to log into the guest network. So now we'll talk a little bit about the professional pack features. So with professional pack features, it gives you access to some more additional granular controls when it comes to setting things up. It also gets you access to some advanced radius authentication, the ability to use AAA on radius authentication for like guest networks and stuff. It gets you access to a in-depth network report view, which shows you what's going on in the network and helps chart and helps you understand which users may be having access issues or poor performance. It gives you access to our artificial intelligence for providing troubleshooting to help try to solve wireless issues. It gives you access to the ability to use templates. So you can create templates to more easily push out changes across multiple sites. The ability to back up and restore switch configurations, things like that. Gives you access to dynamic pre-shared key. So this is an alternative. So a lot of times at businesses, right, it's not a good idea for every employee to be using a consumer-type pre-shared key to get on the network. So the traditional way of doing this is to use WPA Enterprise, which uses 802.1x authentication. And that way each user gets their own username and password. It's a little bit more complex to set up, as you've got to set up each individual computer device to have certificates and things. And so what happens is a lot of businesses, even though they should be using enterprise security, are not. So one of the problems with that is, you know, an employee leaves the company, either everyone has to change their password or that now perhaps upset employee can still get on the network with their old pre-shared key. So dynamic pre-shared key lets you have one SSID for all users to connect to. And then you give individual users their own unique pre-shared key. And the back end is smart enough when they see a user authenticate with that pre-shared key, they can then assign VLANs and rules for just that user. So it's a really nice feature to provide individualized security passwords for your wireless network with much less configuration required on the individual devices. It also unlocks some additional hotspot features, such as the ability to use Facebook Wi-Fi, which is a special Facebook service which is designed for businesses to basically require users to like your business site before granting access to the guest network. So here's an example here of the advanced wireless report and the artificial intelligence, plotting out, letting you know which users are having issues, when and where. On the switch side of things, it opens up some advanced features such as advanced bandwidth management. If you want granular control of bandwidth, you need ProPack. It gives you the ability to automatically assign VLANs based on the MAC address or the first few digits of the MAC address of connected devices. So for instance, you know, generally you want your voice products on a separate VLAN. And rather than have to set up two sets of switches and run two sets of Ethernet to desks, you can just do one. And then, assuming that all of your VoIP phones are from the same vendor, you just put in the first few digits of their MAC address. And now Nebula can recognize, hey, that device needs to be on the voice LAN voice VLAN, and will automatically do it, rather than having to do it port-based or some other method of doing that. If you are using our 1350 series switches, it gives you the ability in Nebula that you can ping connected PoE devices, and if they go offline, you can automatically power cycle that device to get it rebooted without having to manually do it. Nebula will handle it for you. And if you're doing IPTV, it gives you access to advanced IGMP settings. It also gives you an IPTV report, which provides guidance of what's going on by your IPTV users, and it will let you know of issues that we've detected with those streams and give you suggestions of what features to change to make them work better. And then on the gateway side of things, it gives you access to some of the advanced VPN setup rules. It gives you, like we've talked about before, that automatic network topology. It also unlocks a VPN topology view, gives you access to those alerts that we talked about earlier, just like PlusPack does. So here's an example of the automatic topology view. You can see here it gives you a visual representation. So if you're troubleshooting issues, you can easily figure out which device is connected to which switch, which is connected to which core switch, etc. So in addition to the per-device licenses, we do have some other additional licenses that are available. One of those is what we call the MSP pack license. So the MSP pack license, rather than being linked to devices on a customer site, is linked to an administrator account. So the administrator account that has access, you basically buy the MSP license, assign it to that administrator, and then that administrator has access to a bunch of new features regardless of what site they are connected to or managing, and regardless of what the status is of that site, whether it's free, plus, or pro. So anonymous attendee has a question here about VoIP devices and saying basically they need to be higher priority, but other than that, is there any reason they need to be on a separate VLAN? I am not the expert in this field, but I think generally you want them on their own VLAN. It can help upstream in the network to isolate that traffic onto their own dedicated ports so they are not competing for what I'm going to call airtime on those connections, so you can help deal with congestion issues. I think also just the SIP standard itself is not HTTPS. So in general, you don't want somebody plugging their laptop into that VoIP port and running a packet capture tool. I think a lot of SIP applications out there are just open text. So you don't want someone recording those packets and reconstructing somebody else's conversation. So by using this feature, only those, in theory, only those VoIP type devices will be on that VLAN. Obviously, there are ways around that for people that are really dedicated. And there may be some other issues that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. Hope that answers that question. Okay, back to the MSP license. So what does the MSP license give you? So it gives you a new view when you're looking at your customers. Very similar to when you were looking at a customer and the way you were able to see all the sites summarized. With MSP license, you have an MSP view, which gives you a view of all of your customers and a quick summary of what's going on in those networks. Are they free? Are they paid versions? If they are paid, has the license recently expired? Are any of their devices offline that should be online, et cetera, et cetera? It also unlocks some additional tools for you. One of those tools is what we call MSP branding. You can rebrand the Nebula interface with your logo. You can replace the Zyxel support contact information with your company's information. So again, if you are an MSP, this may be something you want to do if you are giving your customer access to the Nebula interface. And a lot of customers do that. One of the things with the admin accounts is they are very granular. So you can control which specific sites individual admin accounts have access to, but also which features. So oftentimes you will provide your end user with a view-only admin account to be able to log in and see what's going on in the network on their own. So if you're doing that, you may want to rebrand the interface with your branding. So if they have a problem, they don't reach out to Zyxel directly, they reach out to you since you own that relationship. Other thing it gives you access to is it streamlines managing a large number of admin users. So it gives you the ability to group admin accounts as teams, and then rather than individually applying individual admin accounts to sites and organizations, you can just do teams to apply, multiple user or admin accounts to different sites and stuff. So it's just an easier way to manage that. It was a feature we had a lot of requests for from some of our larger customers who have a number of admin accounts saying, if I get a new employee or if an employee leaves, it's really a pain having to go into each individual organization and site and change the settings. So with Teams, it streams like that. So you can just change the members of the teams and it'll automatically change who has access at the org and site level. It also gives you the ability to synchronize the ability to certain settings across multiple customers. So if you have some general admin type settings that you want to have applied across multiple customers, you can easily synchronize those through different customers through that feature. Another feature missing on the slide here that we just recently added is it allows you to basically do email alerts for any organization that admin account has access to, even free accounts. So in some cases, it may be cheaper if the only reason you were thinking about getting a plus account or a plus licensing for your customers was because you wanted those email alerts. It may just be cheaper to get an MSP license, assign it to your main admin account, and it will unlock the email notifications that way. It's an alternate way to unlock that. So on the security side of things, we do have some security licenses. These unlock our UTM and additional advanced security settings. So if you have an older NSG gateway, the UTM services are sold through an NSS security pack license. If you are using the USG Flex and managing it in Nebula, the UTM services are sold through a different UTM security pack. So why do we have two different packs? It's because the security or the UTM functionality is different between the NSG series and the UTM or the USG Flex series. So there's different pricing for depending on which device you want to use because there are different services being offered. And then we recently added a new thing called Secure Wi-Fi. So Secure Wi-Fi allows you to basically take a Nebula managed access point and turn it into a VPN appliance. So it's a really convenient way of providing remote access at small remote offices or at individual employees' homes. Obviously you can configure their laptop and things like that. That's one way to do it. For those of you that don't want to do it because of the admin hassle involved in configuring those devices, this is another alternative. Traditionally, you would send them home with a small VPN appliance. The problem is a lot of home users have a router that's provided by their ISP, and you end up in a double netted situation. So with this secure Wi-Fi feature, you simply give them an access point. It connects to their existing router through an Ethernet port. But because it's not itself a router or gateway, you don't worry about double NAT issues. And you can assign an SSID on that access point that any user device that connects to that SSID is then essentially connected back to the main office using a VPN tunnel. And now that SSID, for security reasons, it has to be encrypted with WPA2 or WPA3, and it does require you use, I believe, 802.1x authentication to make sure that user has access to it. So that way you don't have to worry about a guest to your home or one of your kids getting on the business SSID and getting access to the corporate network. So that requires its own license for the gateway to provide that functionality, and it does require the central office have one of our USG Flex gateways or an ATP gateway at the central office. It's just showing here how it works. So that is it for today's Nebula presentation. If you want to play around with Nebula and you haven't already, you can simply go to nebula.zyxel.com. There is a button on the login page that will take you to the live demo. You just click on that and it will take you over to a demo site. So you can play around with the interface. These devices are actually working at 3 different hotels that we have deployed. So you are seeing real-world data, although the demo sites just have, I believe, one AP per hotel, I think one switch and maybe one gateway. You can also reach out to your salesperson if you are an authorized Zyxel reseller, and you can get access to a 60-day demo kit. It should be noted right now that our switch supply, due to chipset issues and due to horrible port delays, are extremely limited, so we may not be able to provide you a demo switch, but we can definitely provide you some a demo AP and very possibly a demo gateway as well. And then just reminders here, almost all of our webinars are recorded and will generally be posted within 24 or 48 hours to our YouTube channel. So if you missed a webinar or you attended a webinar and you think one of your fellow employees may benefit from it, you can always point them to the YouTube channel to watch a recording of that live webinar. And then feel free to link to us over here on LinkedIn, where we are known as Zyxel-US channel. Otherwise, it's just open to questions. If you have some questions, use that question and answer interface in Zoom, and I will try to answer them for you. My email is up there, seanr@zyxel.com. Feel free to reach out to me offline. Or if you have any questions, you can always send them to your sales guy, Jacob, Andy, or David. And if need be, they can get me looped in, they can get Tri looped in, they can get Marcus looped in if needed. So I have no questions pending. I will stick around here for another moment for those of you who may be typing something up. But if you don't have any questions, thanks for joining us, guys. Please join in some of our other webinars. I'm going to go ahead and stop recording.